Every morning I go to the window and look at the old oak tree in the yard. The tree will outlive us all, Eleanor used to say. She loved that oak, sitting under it on summer evenings with a book. Now I go out there alone, with a cup of strong tea without sugar. My name is Norbert Page, and I'm 67 years old. For the last 5 of those years, I have lived alone in our house in Dover since Eleanor passed away. The morning ritual with tea by the window is the only thing that has remained unchanged since then. The rest of her life has become a retired man's safe haven, measured, predictable, and empty. Dover's a small town, but it has character, like myself. All my life I worked as an accountant in a construction company, counting other people's money and saving my own. Nothing outstanding, but I honestly did my job and was able to provide for my family. Our house, 2-story, with a white picket fence and a small garden, is paid for in full. No debts. It's always been my guiding principle to live within my means. Today is Tuesday, the day I usually call Aiden, or rather, I've called him before. My son is the only child Eleanor and I were able to have. She went through a difficult labor after which she was never able to get pregnant again. All our hopes and dreams centered on Aiden. Maybe we spoiled him too much. Eleanor certainly couldn't deny him anything. I tried to be tougher, but I guess not enough. The phone's been silent for the 3rd Tuesday in a row. Last time we'd spoken briefly, dryly, as if we were strangers. Aiden said he had a lot of work to do, that Rose was planning some kind of charity dinner, and that they were very busy. The usual excuses. I've heard them dozens of times over the years. Rosalind is my sister-in-law, cold as a January morning. From the first time we met, there was a black cat between us. She looked at me as if I'd brought dirt from the street onto her spotlessly clean parquet. Maybe I had. I'd never followed fashion and didn't know the rules of etiquette for knives and forks. Eleanor had always said that what mattered was a good heart, not the ability to hold up a pinky finger when drinking tea. But to Rose, I was a redneck from day one. She's the kind of person who says thank you, like she's doing me a favor. Aiden met her in college. She was studying art history, he was studying economics. After they married, he took a job at an insurance company, and she took a job organizing cultural events at a local gallery. Not that Dover was an art center, but Rose was careful to pretend that she was running a branch of the Louvre. I remember our first serious spat. It was at the christening of their firstborn son, my grandson Hayden. Eleanor was still alive then, and we arrived together, all dressed up, with a gift of silver spoon that had been passed down in our family for generations. "That's nice," Rose said in a tone that made it clear otherwise. "But we've already ordered a whole set of silverware from Tiffany's." Eleanor went pale then. I saw her hands tremble as she tucked the family spoon back into the velvet case. I didn't say anything that day. I didn't want to spoil the party. But something broke inside. After Eleanor died, things got worse. It was like the last buffer between me and my sister-in-law was gone. Aiden became more and more distant, calling less often, visiting only on big holidays, and even then not for long. I saw my grandson only once every 6 months. The last time was on his birthday, when he turned 6. I gave him a wooden model airplane I'd made myself. Hayden loved it. Rose didn't. "Norbert, this thing is full of splinters," she said, taking the toy from the upset boy. "And it smells like varnish." I wanted to argue that the varnish was completely dry, that I'd spent a month on this model, that when I was a kid, such toys were worth their weight in gold. But I didn't. Again, Eleanor always said I was too stubborn and proud. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's why Rose and I will never find common ground. In recent years, I've often wondered what went wrong. Aiden was a good boy, sensitive, kind. We'd go fishing, fix an old motorcycle in the garage, talk about life. When he went to college, I was prouder of him than anything in the world. Eleanor cried tears of joy. We hoped he would be the first in the family to get a college education. And he did. And then he met Rose. I pour myself a second cup of tea and pull out a photo album. There's Aiden at 5, a gap-toothed smile, knees in green. Here's him and me flying a kite on the beach. Here's his graduation, him in his gown, Eleanor and I at his sides, happy and proud. And here's his wedding, he and Rose cutting the cake. I'm standing off to the side, a strained smile, Ty choking me. That's when things started to change. Imperceptible at first. Less frequent calls, shorter conversations. Then more obvious. Canceled visits. Forgotten birthdays. And after Eleanor died, it was like a cut thread. She died suddenly. A stroke. I found her in the garden, under that oak tree. The doctors said there was no chance. Massive hemorrhage. Aiden flew in for the funeral. Rose was there too, in a black dress, with impeccable makeup. She put her hand on my shoulder and said something about time heals. I wasn't listening. I looked at the coffin and thought half of me was going underground with Eleanor. After the funeral, Aiden offered me the chance to sell the house and move in with them. They had a big house in the suburbs with a guest room. I said no. I couldn't imagine living under the same roof as Rose, listening to her remarks about my habits, seeing her judgmental eyes on me. Aiden didn't insist. I think he was glad I refused. I was in my house with my memories, and they were in theirs with a new life that had no place for me. At least we used to get together for the holidays. Thanksgiving, Christmas. Now that's gone too. The phone rings, interrupting my thoughts. I flinch. Is it Aiden? But no, it's Harold, my neighbor. We play chess sometimes in the evenings. Norb, how about a game tonight? He asks in his creaky voice. Sorry, Harold, not tonight. I don't feel well. That's a lie. My health is fine for my age. I'm just not in the mood for company, even one as harmless as old Harold. After the conversation, I look at the calendar. Thanksgiving is 2 weeks away. Usually Aiden calls ahead, invites me. Last year he didn't. I dialed his number myself the week before the holiday. Rose answered the phone and said they were planning to celebrate with friends. I kept silent then, swallowed my resentment. This year I decided to wait for their call. I guess I was wrong. I sit in my chair in the evening, watching an old detective show on TV and wondering if I should call myself. Pride struggles with loneliness. I imagine Rose's cold voice, her next excuse, and my hand doesn't reach for the phone. Instead, I reach for the box of Eleanor's letters. We met when I was in the Army. Nothing heroic, just mandatory service. She worked at the library in a neighboring town. We wrote to each other every day. She had beautiful handwriting, smooth with a slight slant to the right. Dear Norbert, I read the first lines. Saw the first snow today. Imagined us walking together, leaving footprints on the white blanket. Soon you'll be back, and we'll be together. I'm so looking forward to it. Eleanor always had a way with words, not like me. Maybe that's why Aiden was distant. Maybe I didn't tell him how I felt. Eleanor often reproached me for it, said I was too reserved, that I should be more open with my son. The next morning I decide to call. I dial the number, listen to the dial tone. Rose answers. Hello. Her voice is dry and businesslike. Hello, Rose, it's Norbert. Can I talk to Aiden? He's at work. Is it urgent? No, I just wanted to talk to you. How's Hayden? He's good. Busy with school? Sports? We're good, Norbert. I can hear the impatience in her voice. She's waiting for me to finish talking to her. I'm calling about Thanksgiving, I say finally. Will you be... Oh, she interrupts. We're planning to spend it with Chloe's parents. You remember Chloe? Aiden's college friend. They've invited us to their country house. It'll be a small group, just close friends. I get it. Just close friends, and I'm not one of them. Okay, I say. Say hi to Aiden and Hayden. I will. Sorry, Norbert, I'm in a meeting right now. It was nice talking to you. She hangs up without waiting for my response. I sit there, phone in hand, and feel a familiar bitterness growing inside. Not resentment, I've long outgrown resentment. Something deeper and darker. All day long I find no place to be, going through old stuff in the garage, trying to read, even starting to make dinner, though I usually make do with a sandwich. Nothing helps. My thoughts return to the conversation with Rose, to her cold tone, to the phrase about close friends. In the evening, the phone rings. I pick it up without looking at the number. Dad, Aiden's voice sounds tired. Rose said you called. Yeah, I wanted to see how you were doing. I'm okay. Lots of work, not a lot of time. It's just business as usual. We don't talk. We used to always have something to talk about. Now every conversation is like a taut string ready to burst. Rose said you're going to a friend's house for Thanksgiving, I say. Yeah, to Chloe's parents. They've been asking me for a long time. This year they decided to go for it. You remember Chloe, right? She went to college with us. I do. Another pause. I can hear him sighing. Dad, listen, I know this happened last year too, but there's really no options right now. We've already agreed. It's not convenient to cancel. I understand. Maybe we could get together for Christmas. Hayden misses you. I know that's not true. Hayden barely remembers me because we don't see each other very often. But I'm not arguing. Sure, Christmas would be nice. Oh, that's great. I'll call you when we're closer to the case. Okay, Dad, I gotta go. We're having dinner with Rose's coworkers tonight. Sure, I'll talk to you later. I hang up the phone and sit back in my chair. It's getting dark outside. It's starting to rain, a fine, persistent rain. The dampness creeps into the house despite the closed windows. Or so it seems to me. I think back to last year's Thanksgiving. I spent it alone, microwaving a supermarket dinner and drinking half a bottle of whiskey, which I don't usually drink. I remember watching old family videos. Aiden taking his first steps, Eleanor laughing, me younger and happier. This year, it will be the same again. Again, I'll be alone in an empty house while they party with close friends. I can feel something inside breaking, the last straw, something I've been holding back for years. To hell with it, I think. Fuck their invitations and excuses. I pull out the bottle of scotch I'm saving for special occasions, pour it into a glass, and drink in a gulp. The alcohol burns my throat. It's going to be different this year, I decide. This year, I'm going to go to their house for Thanksgiving myself, uninvited. Let them try not to let me in. Let them try to kick me out the door. I know it's a bad idea, that it will only make things worse, but I don't care. I'm tired of being the polite old man who doesn't bother anyone's life. Tired of swallowing grudges and pretending everything is fine. I'm going to go to their house on Thanksgiving, and whatever happens. It was a chilly morning. I stared out the window at the wet leaves clinging to the asphalt and thought back to the first time I'd met Rosalind. 8 years ago, Aiden had brought her to meet us. Eleanor made her signature apple pie. I shined my shoes and put on the shirt I usually save for special occasions. We were excited. Aiden was bringing a girl home for the first time. She walked into the house looking around with an expression I couldn't quite pinpoint at the time. Now thinking back, I realize it was a poorly concealed squeamishness. Our house is good, clean, but without pretensions to luxury or refinement. The furniture is good, but old, and on the walls are family photos in simple frames. Mom, Dad, this is Rosalind Barton. Aiden introduced her, and I could tell he was nervous. Rose, she smiled, extending her hand first to Eleanor, then to me. The handshake was light, like she was afraid of getting dirty. She was wearing a simple black dress, but I knew it was expensive. Jewelry was minimal, a thin chain around her neck, small pearl earrings. Eleanor looked like a country girl in her best floral dress. At dinner, Rose talked about her family. Her father was a lawyer, her mother organized charity events, about her studies at a private school, about traveling in Europe. She spoke measuredly, with a slight smile, but her eyes remained cold. When Eleanor asked how they'd met Aiden, Rose let him answer, but then gently corrected a few details. Actually, we met at a lecture on modern art, she said. Aiden came in by mistake, looking for an audience for his economics group. I noticed right away that he wasn't from our department. He looked so lost. She laughed, and Aiden laughed with her. I noticed the way he was looking at her, with admiration and some uncertainty. I thought I'd stay for the lecture since I was here, he added, although I didn't understand anything about Cubism and Expressionism. But you do now, don't you, darling? Rose put her hand on his wrist. I've made a real art lover out of him. After lunch, I suggested coffee. Eleanor took out our best set, a china set with blue flowers, a silver wedding present from a colleague. What lovely cups, Rose said in a tone that made me realize she thought they were cheap and tasteless. When we sat down in the living room, Rose continued to ask us questions about work, about the house, about Dover. Answering felt like an exam. So you've been an accountant all your life, Mr. Page? She asked, taking small sips of coffee. Yes, 35 years in the same company. Started as a junior accountant, worked my way up to department head. That's pretty steady, she nodded. My father always needs good accountants in his firm. He says finding an honest financier is like winning the lottery. I didn't know if that was a compliment or an implication that most accountants were crooks. I remained silent. Eleanor was quick to change the subject, asking Rose about her plans after college. "Oh, I have a lot of ideas," she perked up. "Perhaps a master's degree in art history, or a job in a gallery, or maybe both. My father says with my connections in education, I can choose." An hour later, they left. Eleanor fussed over packing them the rest of the pie. Rose politely declined, but eventually took the package, holding it with 2 fingers. Aiden hugged us goodbye, promising to bring Rose back again. As their car disappeared around the corner, Eleanor and I returned to the house. I expected my wife to be excited about a potential daughter-in-law, well-groomed, educated, from a good family. "What do you think?" I asked, helping to clear the dishes. Eleanor was quiet, uncharacteristically so. "She's not what I expected." "In what way?" "I don't know, Norbert. She's beautiful, smart, but there's something about her. Too arrogant." "That's what I said." "No, I wouldn't say that. Just, different. Not of our world." At that moment, I didn't pay much attention to Eleanor's words. I thought it was just normal maternal jealousy. No woman would ever be good enough for her son. 6 months later, Aiden announced his engagement. Eleanor and I were happy for him, though surprised at the speed of events. The wedding was set for the following spring. Rose wanted to organize everything perfectly, and that took time. Preparing for the wedding showed Rose's true colors. She had taken matters into her own hands, leaving Aiden no say in it. Our involvement was minimized. We just had to show up at the appointed time in the specified clothes. Eleanor offered to help bake the cake, help with the flowers, but Rose politely declined. "Everything's already ordered, Mrs. Page. Professional pastry chefs, florists. Don't worry, I've got everything under control." Aiden spent the 2 weeks leading up to the wedding nervous. He arrived at our house without Rose. She was at a dress fitting. "Dad," he said, sitting with me in the garage where I was trying to fix an old radio. "Did you never have any doubts? You know, before you and Mom got married?" I put the screwdriver aside and looked at my son. He looked exhausted. "Doubt, of course. That's normal, son. Marriage is a big step. Rose, she's great. It's just that, sometimes—" He's quiet for a while, trying to find the words. "Sometimes I think she wants to change me, make me someone else." I wanted to tell him that I'd noticed that the first time I'd met her, that Rose looked at him like a project, like raw material to be worked on. But I didn't. I didn't want to interfere. "Everyone's going to try to change you, Aiden. The question is whether those changes are for the better. Do they make you happier, stronger, or just different?" He nodded, but I could see that my words didn't hit the mark. Aiden had already made his choice, maybe even before he'd brought Rose to meet us. The wedding was lavish, with 200 guests, most of them friends and co-workers of Rose's parents. There were only a few of our family, my sister and her husband, Eleanor's cousin and his wife and daughter. We were lost among the elegant crowd. Rose was radiant in a dress that Eleanor whispered to me cost like a used car. Aiden looked happy, though a little tense. During the reception, I watched Rose introduce him to his acquaintances, professors, lawyers, doctors. I saw him trying to keep the conversation going, Rose gently taking the initiative when he said the wrong thing. After the wedding, they bought a house in the suburbs, twice the size of ours, with a garden and a swimming pool. Rose's parents helped with the down payment. When we arrived for the housewarming party, Rose met us in the perfectly clean living room. Not a single speck of dust, not a single thing out of place. "Come on in. Just please take your shoes off," she said, pointing to a special stand by the entrance. "We've just put down new carpet." Eleanor brought a homemade pie and a bottle of wine. Rose thanked her, but the pie never appeared on the table. Instead, she served some tiny appetizers with names I couldn't pronounce. While Rose showed Eleanor around the house, Aiden and I sat in his office. He was showing me his new stereo, talking about his work. He looked tired. "How's married life?" I asked him bluntly. "Good, Dad," he answered a little too quickly. "Rose is a wonderful wife. You know, she's done the whole house herself. She has great taste." I nodded. The house did look like the cover of a magazine. but it didn't feel alive, warm. What about you? How's the new place treating you? Aiden shrugged. I'm getting used to it. Rose changed a lot of things. Said my old stuff didn't fit the concept. What kind of stuff? Well, my rock band posters, my baseball card collection, the old leather couch I bought with my first paycheck. It's all in the garage or at a flea market now. I remembered how proud he was of that couch. He'd been saving up for it for months. It's important to have room in the house for your stuff too, son, I said gently. Aiden looked at me with mild irritation. Dad, this isn't college anymore. You can't live like a student all your life. Rose was right. You have to move forward, evolve. That night I realized I was losing my son. Not all at once, not completely, but piece by piece. Rose was slowly but surely erasing everything that connected him to the past, to us. A year later, Hayden was born. Eleanor and I were happy to be grandparents. We tried to help in any way we could, but Rose politely declined. We have a nanny, Mrs. Page, professional, with references and a medical degree, but thank you for the offer. Eleanor was upset. She dreamed of babysitting her grandson. I'd seen her crying at night, thinking I was asleep, but she never complained out loud, never criticized Rose in front of Aiden. As the years went by, our meetings became less and less frequent, our conversations more and more superficial. Every time I visited, I felt like a stranger. The house changed, new furniture, new paintings on the walls, new appliances. Aiden changed too. His speech, his manner of dress, his interests. He started playing golf, going to the opera, drinking wine, figuring out grape varieties and regions. One day, this was about a year before Eleanor died, we were invited to dinner. Rose had organized it for gallery colleagues and a few local artists. Eleanor and I felt out of place among this bohemian crowd. Over dinner, the conversation turned to contemporary art. I kept silent. I didn't know anything about it. But after the third glass of wine, I decided to keep the conversation going. Don't you think that contemporary art is too detached from reality? I asked the bald-headed man, who, as it turned out, was a rather famous sculptor. I mean, these abstractions, these installations made of garbage, the average person doesn't understand anything about it. There was silence at the table. Rose smiled strainedly. What Norbert means is that art is sometimes difficult for the untrained viewer, she said, trying to smooth things over. No, I mean exactly what I said, I countered, irritated by her condescending tone. Half of what they call modern art is just pretentious nonsense passed off as profound works of art. The sculptor grinned. That's an interesting opinion, Mr. Page. Bold. I beg to differ. He launched into a long tirade about conceptualism and the role of the viewer in interpreting art. I stopped listening after a minute. Instead, I watched Rose and Aiden. She sat with a strained smile, he with an expression of embarrassment on his face. After dinner, as the guests dispersed, a scandal broke out. For the first time, I saw Rose lose her icy calm. What was that, Norbert? She asked, crossing her arms over her chest. Why did you put Aiden in such an awkward position? I was just stating my opinion, I replied. Isn't that what you do in intellectual conversations? Exchange opinions? There's opinions and then there's ignorance, she said. You insulted Jerome. He's one of the most influential people in the local art community. His last work was exhibited in New York. And what was that work? A bunch of tin cans on a string? I grinned. Dad, that's enough, Aiden interjected. He looked tired and angry. You've had too much wine. Let's end this conversation. Aiden, your father didn't overdo it. He just showed me who he really was, Rose said, keeping her eyes on me. A rude, uneducated man who didn't care about his son's feelings. Eleanor, who had been silent until then, stood up. Rose, don't talk about Norbert like that. He's entitled to his opinion, even if it differs from yours. Of course, Mrs. Page, Rose put on her mask of politeness again. Everyone is entitled to an opinion, but there's a time and a place for expressing it. We left right after that. Eleanor was silent all the way home. Only before she went to bed did she say, Norbert, we have to be careful. Rose is turning Aiden against us. Let her try, I grumbled. He's our son. He's known us his whole life. Knew us, Eleanor corrected quietly. Now he knows us through her perception. And that's different. After that meeting, Aiden didn't call for weeks. Then he did, but the conversation was strained. We never mentioned that night, but it hung between us like a heavy curtain. A few months later, Eleanor died. At the funeral, Rose was impeccable, in a black suit with perfect hair and makeup. She organized the wake at our house, managed the catering, welcomed the guests. Everything was perfect, like one of her receptions. After the funeral, our relationship with Aiden became even more strained. Eleanor had always been a buffer between us, smoothing over the rough edges. Without her, we were like two strangers who didn't know what to talk about. Rose no longer hid her feelings for me. Now that Eleanor was gone, she could afford to be frank. "Norbert," she said to me one day when Aiden wasn't around, "I understand your grief. Losing a wife is hard, but Aiden's suffering too. He needs to move on. We all do." I stared at her, not sure what she was getting at. "What do you mean?" "I think it would be better if you didn't keep reminding him of the past, your views, which, let's be honest, are a bit out of date. The world's changing, Norbert. Aiden's changing with it. He needs support, not constant reminders of the way he used to be." I realized she was asking me to disappear from my son's life. Polite, gloved, but unambiguous. "Rose," I said, trying to remain calm, "I'm his father. I will always be a part of his life, whether you want me to be or not." She smiled her trademark cold smile. "Of course you will, Norbert. I just want everyone to be comfortable." After that conversation, the invitations became even less frequent. Aiden called on duty. For my birthday, for Christmas. He came once every few months, always briefly, always with some business in town, so a visit to me was on the way. Hayden grew up without knowing his grandfather. To him, I was the strange old man you see once every 6 months and have to show school drawings to. I tried to find a common language with him, gave him constructors, told him stories from my childhood. But Rose always stood between us, ready to intervene if the conversation took a wrong turn. Now looking at my phone, I think about Thanksgiving coming up, about spending it alone again, about the fact that Rose has almost accomplished her goal of pushing me out of my son and grandson's lives completely. But this time, I'm not going to sit home and feel sorry for myself. This time, I'm going to go to them. No invitation, just knock on the door and look my daughter-in-law in the eye when she tries to keep me out. Aiden is my son. Hayden is my grandson. I have a right to be a part of their lives, and no Rose with her arrogance and snobbery can change that. I pull out my calendar, mark the day, the last Thursday in November. I make a note. Aiden's. Decision made. Whatever happens. Thanksgiving morning was as gray and dreary as my mood. Low clouds hung over Dover, promising rain by evening. I was up early, though I usually let myself stay in bed until 9 on weekends. But today was no ordinary day. Today I decided to break an unspoken rule and show up uninvited at my son's house. I drank a strong black coffee, standing by the window and looking out at my empty garden. Eleanor adored this time of year when the trees shed their leaves in preparation for winter. "There's a beauty in that, Norbert," she said. "They free themselves of all unnecessary things so they can survive the cold and be reborn in the spring." She always found philosophy in simple things. Opening my closet, I spent a long time choosing what to wear. Eventually, I settled on a dark blue suit that I wore only for special occasions. Funerals, weddings, Aiden's graduation. I wore the same tie I'd worn on Eleanor's and my golden wedding day, a maroon one in a small pattern. She'd given it to me, saying the color accentuated my eyes. Silly, of course, but I kept that tie as an heirloom. As I was packing, I caught myself a few times thinking that maybe I was making the wrong decision. Maybe I should have called to warn him. Or should I have just stayed home as usual? Order a turkey from the supermarket, open a bottle of whiskey, and watch old movies alone? But then I remembered Rose's face, her condescending smile the last time she'd spoken to me on the phone. "Sorry, Norbert, we've already made other plans." As if my desire to spend the holiday with my only son and grandson was something inappropriate, an imposition. The decision hardened. "I'm going. Let them try to kick me out the door. At least I'll see their faces when I knock on the door." See Aiden's reaction. Did he really not want to see me, or was it all Rose's manipulation? At 2:30, I got into the car. The old Ford grumbled, but it started on the third try. I'd thought about buying a new car, but I'd put it off. I was used to it, and why would I need a new one? Where do I go? The store, sometimes to Harold's for chess, once a month to the library? Not the kind of life to spend on a new car. It took about 40 minutes to get to Aiden's house. He lived in the suburbs of Dover, in an upscale neighborhood. The cottages were spaced a fair distance apart, with manicured lawns and tall hedges. Aiden and Rose's house stood out even against this background, 2 stories high, with columns at the entrance and large windows. Classic style with modern elements. Rose must have consulted a designer. As I pulled onto the highway, rain began to fall. Small at first, almost imperceptible, but gradually getting heavier. By the time I turned onto the street where Aiden lived, it had turned into a torrential downpour. The windshield wipers could barely keep up. Visibility was at a minimum. I slowed down, looking at the house numbers. When I got to the right address, I hesitated to turn off the engine. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, staring at the house through the wall of water. There were lights on in the windows. There were 2 cars in the driveway, Aiden's black BMW and Rose's silver Volvo. So they were home. There were no other cars in sight. It looked like the guests hadn't arrived yet, or weren't expected at all. Maybe Rose had lied about the invitation from her friends. The thought made me more determined. I turned off the engine, grabbed a small gift for Hayden from the passenger seat, a wooden model of a ship I'd made myself, and stepped out into the pouring rain. I'd forgotten my umbrella, of course. I had to run to the porch, covering the gift with the hem of my jacket. In the 15 seconds it took me to get to the door, I was soaking wet. My hair stuck to my forehead, water dripped from my nose, and my suit was darkened with moisture. It was a great start to the visit, to say the least. I stood on the porch for a few seconds, trying to catch my breath and collect my thoughts. My heart was pounding, partly from running fast, partly from excitement. There were muffled voices coming through the door, laughter. It sounded like Hayden was arguing with his father about something. Finally, I pressed the bell. A melodic chime echoed through the house. The voices faded. Footsteps came, light, feminine. Rose. The door opened, and there she was, in a perfectly pressed ivory cashmere sweater and dark blue slacks. She wore a string of pearls around her neck, her hair elegantly styled. Not a single flaw, as always. First there was a look of bewilderment on her face, then recognition, and finally poorly concealed irritation. "Norbert?" She said my name as if she'd seen a cockroach in her spotless kitchen. "What are you doing here?" I tried to smile, but my lips wouldn't do it. Water dripped from my hair onto my face, making me feel ridiculous and out of place. But I couldn't back down. "Happy Thanksgiving, Rose," I said as calmly as I could. "I thought I'd stop by for the holiday. I hope I'm not too late for dinner." Her eyes narrowed. She looked me over from head to toe, a drenched, miserable old man standing on her spotless porch. "Norbert, we didn't invite you," she said. "I told you on the phone we had other plans for tonight." I thought maybe those plans had changed. I tried to keep my voice even, though I was seething inside. "Or maybe you just forgot to invite me. It happens." "Nothing has changed, and we haven't forgotten anything," Rose said. "We have guests, important people. You can't just show up unannounced." "I don't see any guest cars," I said, nodding toward the empty driveway. "They'll be here any minute," Rose said quickly. "Look, now's not the time for this. You're soaked, you need to go home. Get changed, dry off." "I'd rather do that here," I insisted, "and see Aiden and Hayden. It's a family holiday after all." Rose's face contorted with anger. "Norbert, you're unbearable. I said no. We didn't expect you. We didn't prepare for your arrival. You can't just barge into our lives whenever you want." "Rose, who's there?" Aiden's voice came from deep inside the house. She didn't answer, still glaring at me. "Call your son," I said quietly. "Let him decide if he wants to see his father on Thanksgiving. I'm his wife, and I decide who crosses the threshold of our home," Rose hissed, "especially when it comes to uninvited guests who ruin our plans." "Rose, who is it?" Aiden repeated, and his footsteps sounded in the hallway. She shot a quick glance over her shoulder, then turned back to me. Her eyes were panicked. She obviously didn't want Aiden to see me on the doorstep. "Why are you here?" she shouted with sudden fury. Get out! Before I could say anything, she slammed the door in my face. I heard the lock click. I stood stunned for a few seconds, unable to believe what was happening. Rain whipped down my back, water dripping down my collar. I was still clutching the soggy gift for Hayden to my chest. Rose? What's wrong? Aiden's muffled voice came to me. Some vagrant, she said, asking for money. I told him I'd call the police if he didn't leave. I didn't hear what Aiden said. The blood was pounding in my temples, red spots floating in front of my eyes. Tramp. That's what I'd become to them, an unkempt old man they were ashamed to let in the house. I stood for a moment longer, hoping the door would open, that Aiden would come out, see me, resent my wife's behavior. But no one came out. There were only indistinct voices coming from the door, and then the sound of the TV on. I think it was a sports channel, as if nothing had happened. Slowly shifting my suddenly heavy legs with difficulty, I walked back to the car. It was still raining, but I didn't try to hide from it. What was the point? I was soaked to the skin. As I got behind the wheel, I put my hands on the steering wheel and froze, staring at the house. Silhouettes flickered in the living room windows. Rose, Aiden, the small figure of Hayden. My family. Unreachable. Alien. I don't know how long I sat like that. Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe half an hour. There were no thoughts, just the dull ache in my chest and the sound of the rain drumming on the roof of the car. Then something changed. I felt a hot wave rise up inside. Not sadness, not resentment, not hurt, but pure, undiluted rage. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to be truly angry at Rose, at Aiden, at this whole situation. A tramp, huh? A person to get rid of as soon as possible? I remembered the way she'd stood in the doorway, impeccable, pampered, with contempt in her gaze. How she lied to her son without blinking an eye, slamming the door shut, leaving me out in the rain. And then it hit me. I knew how to answer. I knew how to make her feel a fraction of the humiliation I felt. I pulled my cell phone out of my jacket pocket. Luckily, it wasn't wet. The inside pocket was deep enough. Flipping through the contacts, I found the number I wanted. Bud Cranston, an old buddy of mine. We'd met when we were young, bowling together in the City League. Now he ran a small tow truck service in Dover. Bud, it's Norbert Page, I said when he picked up the phone. Sorry to bother you on a holiday. Norb, buddy, his loud voice cheered me up a little. What are you doing here? You know I'm always on the phone for old friends, even on holidays. I need a favor, Bud. Not exactly by the book, but... Spit it out, he interrupted. If I can help you, I will. I explained the situation, briefly, uncluttered. I said I wanted to teach my sister-in-law a lesson for leaving me out in the rain on Thanksgiving. I didn't go into the details of years of conflict, just said she deserved a little lesson. Bud listened without interrupting. When I finished, he whistled. She's tough on you, Norb. Not the family way. So you gonna help me out? I asked. He was quiet for a few seconds. You know what? On another day, I might have said no, but leaving the father of the family out in the rain on Thanksgiving? That's overkill. Give me an address and a description of the car. I'm on it. I dictated the address and described Rose's Volvo, a silver late-model Volvo with a license plate I knew by heart. Bud promised to send a tow truck within the hour. Where do you want me to tow it? He asked. I hesitated. I didn't want to cause any serious trouble, just to teach a lesson. To your impound lot. But don't officially register it. Just let it sit there until tomorrow. When she calls in a panic, tell her it was taken by mistake and return it without a fine. But not until tomorrow morning. Bud snorted. You want her to suffer, but not too much? I understand. We'll do it. Consider it my Thanksgiving present, old buddy. We said our goodbyes and I leaned back in my seat, feeling strangely relieved. It was a petty, even childish act of revenge. But somehow the thought of Rose going out after dinner and not finding her precious car made me feel a little better. I decided not to leave right away. I wanted to see how things would play out. I drove the car a little farther down the street, parking behind a large oak tree where Aiden's house was visible. But I couldn't be seen. The rain was finally starting to subside, turning to a light drizzle. I turned on the stove, trying to dry my clothes a little. I sat and watched the house and waited. About 40 minutes passed. It got dark outside. The streetlights came on. The rain had almost stopped. And then a tow truck, big yellow, with a flashing light on the roof, drove into the street. I recognized it at once, one of the ones that worked for Bud. The tow truck pulled slowly up to Aiden's house, turned around and backed up to Rose's Volvo. The driver, a stocky man in a uniform jacket, deftly jumped out of the cab and began preparing the platform. Everything happened quickly and clearly, as in a well-rehearsed dance. A few minutes later, the silver Volvo was already securely fastened to the wrecker platform. I watched the process, feeling a mixture of schadenfreude and shame. Part of me knew it was petty and undignified, that Eleanor wouldn't approve of such an act. But the other part, the darker and more secretive part, enjoyed this small act of retribution. The tow truck drove off, taking Rose's car away. Nothing had changed in the windows of the house. The family continued to celebrate, unaware that they were missing. I started the engine, getting ready to leave. Home, to an empty house with a cold dinner and a bottle of whiskey, to my loneliness and bitterness. But something made me stay. I wanted to see the final performance. Another hour or so passed. It was finally getting dark. All the windows in Aiden's house were lit up, bright, welcoming, inviting. I imagined them sitting around the table, Rose carving the turkey, Hayden chatting about school, Aiden talking about work. Just a normal family dinner, without me. And then the front door swung open. Rose appeared on the doorstep, still in the same immaculate sweater, but now with her coat slung over her shoulders. She stepped out onto the porch looking around. It was noticeable that she was looking for something. After a moment, she took a quick step down the porch and walked toward where her Volvo was parked. She stopped, clearly puzzled, looked around as if the car might just have moved to a different location. Then she pulled her cell phone out of her pocket, apparently trying to make a call. Even from a distance, I could see the expression on her face change from bewilderment to worry, from anxiety to panic. She went back into the house, but just a minute later, she was back on the porch, now with Aiden. They were talking animatedly about something. Aiden looked over to where the car was supposed to be parked, then pulled out his cell phone. I imagined them calling the police, reporting it stolen. How Rose would then call the insurance company, explaining the situation, filling out forms. How her whole perfect holiday would be ruined. And for the first time in a long time, I felt contentment. Not joy, that was a long way off. But at least that, the grim, bitter satisfaction of being able to return the favor. I started the car and drove quietly out of the street, unnoticed by anyone. It was going to be a long night in an empty house, but I knew my phone would soon be ringing off the hook. Rose would call again and again, trying to find out if I knew anything about her missing car. And I wasn't going to answer it. Let her suffer. Let her feel helpless and humiliated for one night. Like I felt standing in the pouring rain in front of a slammed door. The drive home seemed endless. I drove slowly, absorbed in my thoughts, barely noticing the scenery outside the window. The rain had almost stopped, leaving behind wet asphalt and fog rising over the fields on either side of the highway. My wet clothes clung unpleasantly to my body. Water dripped from his hair onto his collar, sending chills down his spine. But the physical discomfort seemed trifling compared to what was going on inside. I felt a strange mixture of emotions, bitter, resentment, anger, and something akin to satisfaction. A petty, undignified sense of revenge. What has become of me? I thought, mechanically turning the steering wheel on the familiar curve toward home. When did I turn into a vengeful old man who tows his sister-in-law's cars because of a grudge? But another voice, darker and more insistent, countered, when did she turn into a woman who leaves an elderly man to soak in the rain on Thanksgiving? Who lies to her own husband, calling his father a tramp? She deserved it. These two voices argued in my head all the way home. One was the voice of reason and morality that Eleanor had taught me. The other was the voice of resentment and bitterness built up over years of humiliation and alienation. I thought back to Rose's face when she opened the door. How quickly polite surprise had been replaced by poorly concealed irritation. How she hadn't invited me in, hadn't offered me a towel to dry myself off. How she slammed the door right in my face without even saying goodbye. And at the same time, I remembered her face when she discovered the car was missing. Confusion, bewilderment, panic. It was a shallow, undignified pleasure to watch her confusion. But I couldn't deny that I had experienced it. Could it be that I had really become what she had always thought I was? A rude, ill-mannered bumpkin, not worthy of her refined society? Maybe I just confirmed all the unflattering characterizations she'd given me over the years. I arrived at the house at about 7 o'clock in the evening. The windows were dark. I'd forgotten to turn on the timer on the lights. Getting out of the car, I took my time getting inside, stood looking at the house that was once full of life and laughter, the house that Aiden had grown up in, where Eleanor and I had lived for almost 40 years. Now it just seemed like an empty box of memories. I finally walked in, flicked the light switch in the hallway. The dim light flooded the familiar space, the clothes rack, the shoe cabinet, the mirror on the wall. Everything was the same as it had always been. Everything as it had been 1,000 times before. The first thing I did was go to the bathroom, shed my wet clothes, and stood under the hot shower. The water washed away the cold and tension, but it couldn't wash away the bitterness of what had happened. I stood under the jets, eyes closed, and saw Rose's face in front of me. "Why did you come? Get out!" Her words rang in my ears, overpowering the sound of the water. After my shower, I put on the old flannel robe Eleanor had given me for my 60th birthday and went down to the kitchen. I wasn't hungry, but I knew I had to eat something. I opened the refrigerator, half empty as usual. I rarely cooked anything serious for myself. I took out cheese, bread, tomato. I made a simple sandwich and poured a glass of whiskey. On a day like this, I could do that. Sitting at the kitchen table, I tried to analyze the situation cold-bloodedly, as I've done all my life with financial statements. The facts. My daughter-in-law despises me. My son either shares her opinion or is too weak to stand up to her. My grandson barely knows me. I am a stranger in their lives, an unwanted element they want to get rid of. What did I do? Retaliated with petty revenge for another humiliation? Solved the problem? No. Made it worse? Probably. When Rose found out I'd been involved in the disappearance of her car, and she would, I had no doubt, the rift would be deeper, more irreversible. But part of me didn't regret what I'd done. That part, the dark, hidden, unfamiliar part, enjoyed the thought of Rose fumbling around in a panic, calling the police, the insurance company, her perfect holiday crumbling before her eyes. Eleanor wouldn't approve, I thought, taking a sip of whiskey. She'd always been the best part of me. Kind, understanding, forgiving. I imagined what she'd say now, and I felt ashamed, but not embarrassed enough to regret what I'd done. The whiskey burned my throat, warming me from the inside out. I sat in the semi-darkness of the kitchen, lit only by the small lamp above the table, and thought about how things had gotten to this point. When had the relationship with my son turned into a cold war? When had I become the enemy in his eyes? Maybe I had been too hard on him as a child, too demanding, not attentive enough. Or was it something else, the way Rose had methodically turned him against me over the years? I remembered the way Aiden had looked at me at Rose's wedding, with a slight wariness, like he was afraid I'd do something inappropriate, embarrass him in front of his new friends and family. The way he'd yank me back when I told some story from his childhood at the holiday table. "Dad, no one is interested," he said then, and I fell silent, feeling myself blush with shame. Or maybe it all started even earlier, when he went away to college and came back a different person, with new ideas, new friends, new ambitions. I remember us arguing about his career choice. I suggested something solid, stable, and he talked about startups, about risks, about how the world has changed. "You don't understand, Dad," he'd say. "Things are different now." Maybe he's right. Maybe I really don't understand this new world, with its social media, instant messaging, virtual meetings. A world where family values give way to career ambitions, where success is measured not by the happiness of loved ones, but by the numbers in a bank account. The phone rang, snapping me out of my musings. I looked at the screen, the number for Rose. My heart sped up. I knew she was going to call, but I hadn't expected it so soon. I didn't answer. Let her suffer. Let her feel a little of the anxiety and uncertainty I'd felt all these years, not knowing if I'd see my son for the holidays, if he'd call on my birthday. The phone went silent, but a minute later it rang again. It was Rose's number again. I muted the sound but left it on vibrate. The phone shook on the table like an angry insect. After the third ring, a message came through. "Norbert, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Call me back." I grinned. No greeting, no please. Orderly tone, as always. Even when she needed help, she couldn't be polite. The phone continued to vibrate. A fourth ring, a fifth, a sixth. I poured myself a second glass of whiskey and listened to that insistent vibration. There was something hypnotic about the sound. Steady, insistent, inexorable. After the 10th ring, I turned the phone off completely. Silence fell over the kitchen, almost deafening after the incessant buzzing. I sat in that silence, listening to the sounds of the house, the ticking of the old clock in the living room, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the sounds of loneliness. The whiskey had dulled the sharpness of my emotions. Now I felt not so much anger or contentment as fatigue, a deep, all-consuming weariness from a fight that couldn't be won, of trying to break through a wall of alienation that only gets higher every year. I moved into the living room, sinking into my favorite chair. The window overlooked the garden, now plunged into darkness. The rain had intensified again, the drops drumming on the glass. I stared at those trickles of water running down the window pane and thought about Aiden. What a child he'd been. Inquisitive, open, sincere. How excited he was when I came home from work. How proud he was to show me his school projects, his sports awards. How together we fixed his bicycle, built a birdhouse, flew a kite. What's left of that boy? Has he turned into a man I could be proud of? Or into someone I don't even recognize? I thought back to the last time we'd met, at Hayden's birthday party 3 months ago. Aiden had been distant, talking mostly about work. When I'd asked him how he was really doing, he'd responded with the catchphrase, "I'm fine, Dad. Busy as usual." And then he added something about a new project, the prospect of a promotion. Not a word about whether he was happy, whether there were no problems in the family, whether he needed help. It was like he was reporting to a stranger, not talking to his father. I used to blame Rose for everything. Her snobbery, her desire to improve Aiden, to tear him away from his roots. But now, sitting in the empty house, I began to realize that it wasn't just her. Something had broken between me and my son long before she showed up. Something I hadn't noticed or didn't want to notice. Maybe it happened when he was a teenager. Difficult, testy, searching for his place in the world. I remember our fights, about his friends I didn't approve of, about music I didn't understand, about coming home late. I was strict, maybe too strict. Eleanor always took his side, defending him, explaining. I demanded discipline, respect, obedience. Or did that come later when he came back from college with new ideas and ambitions? When he started working for that insurance company I disparaged. "It's not a real job, Aiden," I said then. "You're just selling people fear." I wanted him to find something more worthwhile, more reliable, and he took it as a denial of his choices, of his abilities. The whiskey in the glass was almost gone. I got up to pour another, but stopped. I didn't want to get drunk. I didn't want to face the morning with a heavy head and even heavier thoughts. Instead, I pulled an old photo album from the bookshelf, the same one that Eleanor had so carefully collected all the years we'd been together. Flipping through the pages, I looked at our history, the young, happy faces in the yellowed photos, Aiden's first steps, his high school years, his graduation, his wedding. In one photo, the three of us, me, Eleanor, Aiden, standing hugged against the lake. He's about 15, an awkward teenage angularity, but his smile is genuine, open. My hand on his shoulder, Eleanor holding us both. A real family. What happened to us? When did we lose that sense of unity, of belonging to each other? I closed the album, unable to endure this parade of ghosts of the past. The clock in the hallway struck 10. Late, but I didn't want to sleep. I knew that when I closed my eyes, I'd see Rose's face again, hear her voice. "Why did you come? Get out." Instead of sleeping, I decided to check on Rose's car. I turned on my phone, cringing at the hail of missed calls and messages. 13 calls from Rose, 4 from Aiden. Messages from both of them, increasingly insistent, demanding I call back immediately. Ignoring them, I dialed Bud's number. "Norb, buddy," he answered almost immediately. "I was just thinking of calling you. Your sister-in-law has already cut off all the phones. Did she find your service?" "Yeah, the police told her the car wasn't stolen, it was towed. She checked all the city services and finally came up with us." "And what did you tell her?" Bud chuckled. "Just what we agreed to. That the car had been towed by mistake, that she could pick it up tomorrow morning, no fine, no charge." She was furious, of course, demanded that the car be returned immediately, threatened a lawsuit, the mayor, her lawyer father, and more. I sighed. Typical Rose, used to getting everything immediately, on demand. "Thanks, Bud. Sorry for the trouble." "It's okay," he said. "It's no big deal for a friend. Although the woman is really unbearable, I can see why you'd want to teach her a lesson." After talking to Bud, I turned off the phone again. I didn't want to hear any more of Rose's demanding calls or, worse, Aiden's frustrated questions. I went up to the bedroom and lay down, but I couldn't sleep. The images of the day before, the wet clothes, the slammed door, Rose's face when she discovered the car was missing, were in front of me. I felt a mixture of shame and satisfaction, regret and gloating. Unworthy feelings for a man of my age and position. But I couldn't deny them. Somewhere in the depths of the night, in that twilight state between sleep and wakefulness, I suddenly thought of Hayden, about my grandson, who was innocent of anything, who might have wanted to know his grandfather better if he had been allowed to. I remembered his face when I gave him the model airplane for his birthday. Delight, surprise, gratitude, sincere, childlike, unclouded by adult prejudice. What about now? What will he think when he finds out, and he will find out, children always find out everything, that his grandfather arranged a petty revenge on his mother? That he decided to avenge an offense in such an undignified way? That thought made me feel even worse. Not only had I exacerbated the rift with my son, but I might have lost the chance for a normal relationship with my grandson. I dozed off in the morning, but the dream was restless, filled with vague images and anxiety. I awoke to the sound of the doorbell, insistent and demanding. It was early morning, about 6 o'clock. Who could have come at this hour? Could it be Aiden? Or had Rose decided to tell me in person what she thought? I pulled on my robe and went downstairs before I could even comb my hair. My heart was pounding like crazy. I wasn't ready for a confrontation, not now, not in this condition. Opening the door, I saw Bud. He looked worried. "Norb, I apologize for the early visit, but we have a problem. Your sister-in-law threatened to call the police to the impound lot if we didn't return the car immediately. She called some big boss at City Hall. My boss called me, told me to give the car back now and apologize." I sighed. Rose always knew how to get her way, always had connections and wasn't shy about using them. "Sure, Bud, give me the car. I don't want you to get in trouble." He nodded, clearly relieved. "Thanks, buddy. I knew you'd understand. Your phone's off, and I wanted to warn you that they'll probably be here soon. And they're in a mood, you know." I did. Rose must have been furious. And Aiden. How did Aiden feel? Ashamed of his father? Disappointment? Anger? Bud left and I stood in the doorway, staring out at the empty street. The day promised to be sunny. The first rays were already breaking through the clouds, making the dewdrops glisten on the grass. Ironic. Such a beautiful day for such a terrible conversation. I decided not to wait for their visit. I took a quick shower, got dressed, and went out to the porch where I sat in an old garden chair. If they came, I would wait for them here, not hiding, not apologizing, ready to accept the consequences of my action, no matter how petty and undignified it was. Turning on my phone, I saw a new batch of missed calls and messages. 34 calls from Rose overnight. The number stunned me, such persistence, such desperation over the car. If she'd put even a tenth of that energy into mending her relationship with her husband's father, maybe we wouldn't be in this situation. I sat on the porch, looking out at the waking street and waiting for the inevitable collision. I prepared myself for anger, accusations, perhaps even threats. But a strange calm descended upon me. Whatever happened next, I knew there was no turning back. Rose and I had crossed some invisible line beyond which it was no longer possible to pretend that everything was okay. And part of me, that dark, unseemly part of me, that I'd always tried to suppress, was almost glad for it. An end to pretending, an end to fake smiles and empty promises of, call me next week, cards on the table, pure, unvarnished hostility instead of venomous politeness. I waited and thought about what I would tell Aiden when he arrived, how I would explain my behavior, my silence, my stubbornness, how I would try to convey to him all the pain and loneliness of the last few years. The words swirled in my head, forming into sentences, into whole speeches, but I knew I probably wouldn't say half of them, that he wouldn't listen, that Rose wouldn't let him listen. The sun was rising higher, starting to warm up. The day after Thanksgiving, the day when all masks would be torn off, all pretense cast aside. The day I might lose my son for good, for the momentary satisfaction of petty revenge. The morning after Thanksgiving was surprisingly clear, as if nature were mocking my gloomy mood. I sat on the porch, watching the neighborhood children playing outside. Their carefree laughter cut my ears. What right did anyone have to be happy on a day like this? I barely slept at night, replaying the events of yesterday in my head. The slammed door, the rain dripping down by my collar, the tow truck taking Rose's car away. 34 missed calls on my phone. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Amazed, confused, then furious when she discovered her precious Volvo was missing. Sometime around 10 in the morning, I noticed a familiar car turning onto my street. Aiden's black BMW. My heart thundered, my mouth dry. I knew this conversation was inevitable, but I still wasn't ready for it. Aiden parked in front of the house, but he was in no hurry to get out. I could see his silhouette behind the wheel. He sat still, as if gathering his thoughts, or maybe calming his breathing. Finally, the door opened, and he stepped out, wearing a dark coat, his face tense, withdrawn. I hadn't seen him like that since my mother's funeral. He walked slowly toward the house, as if each step was difficult. I didn't move, still sitting in the chair on the porch. Let him see I wasn't hiding, wasn't avoiding conversation. Whatever happens, I'm willing to take responsibility for my actions. "Good morning, Aiden," I said when he got close enough. He stopped at the foot of the porch, looking up at me. I read a mixture of emotions in his gaze: anger, frustration, exhaustion. "Good? Really, Dad? After what you pulled yesterday, you're saying good morning?" I shrugged, trying to look calmer than I actually was. "It's a really nice day. Clear, sunny. And what happened yesterday? Yeah, we need to talk about that." Aiden shook his head, as if not believing his ears. "Talk? What's there to talk about? You organized the towing of Rose's car, out of our own backyard, on Thanksgiving. Do you realize that she almost lost her mind last night? That we were up all night?" "She wouldn't let me in the house," I said quietly. "She left me standing out in the rain. And that's an excuse for something such a," he searched for a word, "such a petty, spiteful prank?" "No, not an excuse. An explanation." Aiden stepped up onto the porch, stopping a few feet away from me. I could see how angry he was now, the jowls playing on his cheekbones, his eyes dark with anger. "An explanation? Okay, let me explain too. You showed up uninvited when we made it clear we had other plans. You stood on the doorstep all wet, in dirty clothes. What was Rose supposed to do? Invite you to the table like that? We were having a family dinner." "Family?" I asked bitterly. "And who was the family?" "Not me. Rose, Hayden, and I are family," Aiden blurted out. "And a few close friends who came later, when you were already gone. People we feel comfortable with, who share our values and interests." His words hit harder than I expected. People we feel comfortable with. Unlike my own father, with whom apparently there is no comfort. "So there's no room for me in your life?" I asked, trying not to let my voice waver. "I'm not sophisticated enough for your new social circle?" Aiden sighed, as if he were talking to a confused child. "It's not about sophistication, Dad. It's about your attitude. The way you look at our lifestyle, our friends, our interests, always with judgment, always with that condescending sneer. You think it's all empty, ostentatious, insincere. Isn't it?" I couldn't help myself. "All these receptions with tiny hors d'oeuvres and talk of art that no one understands. These people who judge a man by the make of his car and the price of his suit. Is this really what you wanted out of life, Aiden? He clenched his fists, clearly holding back from snapping. That's what I'm talking about. You can't even stop yourself from being judgmental right now. You don't know these people. You don't know our lives. You see everything through your own preconceptions. Yes, we love art. Yes, we go to shows in the theater. Yes, we socialize with people from certain circles. But that doesn't make us bad, insincere, or superficial. What about the fact that you have become ashamed of your roots? I asked quietly. Of your past? Me? Aiden turned away, staring off into the distance. I'm not ashamed of you, Dad. I'm just... He paused, searching for words. We're different. You live in your world, I live in mine. That doesn't mean either one of us is bad. We've drifted apart. And that's Rose's fault? I asked him bluntly. His face hardened instantly. That's the real reason for all this, isn't it? Your dislike of Rose. You've always disliked her. From the beginning. No matter what she did, no matter how hard she tried, you always looked down on her, thought she wasn't worthy of being part of our family. That's not true, I countered. I just watched her change you, how she's alienated you from me, from your roots, making you ashamed of who you were. She never made me ashamed, Aiden almost shouted. She supported me, helped me to grow, to develop, to see more than a small town and a 9-to-5 job. You're the one who's always trying to limit me, to shove me into your idea of the right life. I looked at my son and didn't recognize him. Where had gone that boy who loved fishing and hiking? Who was proud of his first self-assembled model airplane? Who wanted to be like his father? You know, when I went to college, Aiden continued a little quieter, I felt free for the first time. Freedom from your expectations, from your standards. I met people from different worlds, with different views and interests. And I realized I could be anything I wanted to be, not just the son of Norbert Page, the accountant from Dover. His words hurt deeper than he could have imagined. Was I really that much of a burden to him? So restrictive? I never wanted you to be just a copy of me, I said. I wanted you to be happy, to find your own way. But only if that path matched your idea of right and honorable, Aiden parried. When I chose insurance over accounting, you were disappointed. When I became interested in art and theater, you laughed. When I married a woman from a different background, you tensed up and withdrew. There was some truth in what he said, and it made me wonder. Was I really that inflexible? So unable to accept my son's choices? I just wanted stability for you, I answered. I wanted to keep you from making the mistakes I'd made. But they're my mistakes, Dad. Mine! Aiden sounded desperate. You can't live my life for me. You can't decide what's right or wrong for me. I'm a grown man. I have my own family, my own decisions. We were silent. In the silence, we could hear a dog barking somewhere in the distance, a car driving down the neighboring street. Normal life went on, even though our world was falling apart. And yet, I finally said, that doesn't explain why you let your wife kick me out the door, why you didn't come out, didn't say hello, didn't at least invite me out on the porch to dry off. I'm your father, Aiden. No matter how different we are, there are some things you don't do to your own kind. Aiden lowered his eyes. I didn't know it was you. Rose said it was some tramp asking for money. And you believed him? I asked bitterly. Didn't check. Didn't look for yourself. I was busy making gravy for the turkey, he said, and something like shame flickered in his voice. When he went out into the hallway, Rose had already closed the door and said she'd taken care of it. And you didn't ask who it was? Didn't question it? I trust my wife, he cut off, tensing again, and I see no reason to doubt her word. Even when she lies to your face? Aiden took a step toward me, his face contorted with anger. Stop it. Stop vilifying Rose. Stop trying to drive a wedge between us. She's not the one who ruined our relationship, you are. Your stubbornness, your judgment, your inability to accept my choices. And now with the petty, spiteful prank, as you put it, I added calmly. I don't deny it. What I did yesterday was undignified. It was petty, childish even. Then why? Aiden asked, and there was genuine confusion in his voice. Why did you do it? What did you want? I wondered. Why really? What did I want to prove by organizing the evacuation of Rose's car? That I had power? That I could inflict pain in return for pain? That I wasn't just an old, forgotten man by everyone, but still had the power to affect their lives? I guess I'm just broken, I finally said. After so many years of estrangement, after so many attempts to break through the wall she'd built between us, after she slammed the door in my face and called me a tramp, something inside just clicked. I wanted her to feel some of the humiliation I felt. Humiliation? Aiden interjected. You're talking about humiliation? What about the way you humiliated us in front of the guests? How we had to explain why Rose's car suddenly disappeared. How she spent all night on the phone calling the police, the insurance company, tow truck services. I didn't mean for it to go that far, I admitted. I just wanted her to worry a little. The car would have been returned in the morning. No fine, no problem. If she hadn't called the tow truck company and demanded the car back right away. That would have been it, wouldn't it? Aiden sounded sarcastic. You thought of everything, planned this little revenge, and you didn't care what it would do to us, to our guests, to Hayden, who saw his mother almost crying with helplessness and anger. Hayden. I didn't think about my grandson, about how worried he would be over his mother's frustration. It made me feel even worse. I'm sorry that Hayden witnessed that, I said sincerely. It wasn't part of my plan. Wasn't part of your plans? Aiden grinned bitterly. What was? Spoil our party? Make Rose feel helpless? To avenge all the real and imagined wrongs? Maybe all of them at once, I answered quietly. I wasn't proud of what I'd done, but I can't say I regret it completely either. Aiden shook his head, looking at me with an expression I never wanted to see on his face. A mixture of disappointment, pity, and disgust. You know what the saddest part is? You confirmed everything Rose had said about you all these years. That you're a petty, vindictive man, unable to let go of the past and move on. That you hold on to old grudges instead of building new relationships. What was I supposed to do? I asked, feeling a wave of bitterness rising inside. She'd been looking at me from day one like something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. Methodically alienated you from me, from our family, from our traditions, turned you into someone I barely recognize. She didn't turn me into anything. Aiden raised his voice again. It was me, myself. I chose this path, this life, these friends. I changed because I wanted to change, because I saw more possibilities, more paths than the ones you had planned for me. And there was no room for my father in those plans, I said. There would have been if you'd made any effort to understand and accept, Aiden exclaimed. If you hadn't looked down on everything, if you hadn't criticized every choice I made, every decision I made, if you just let me be me, not what you wanted me to be. We were silent again. I looked at my son and saw in his eyes the pain that had accumulated over the years, pain I didn't even know existed. Was I so blinded by my resentment toward Rose that I didn't realize I was hurting my own son? I didn't know you felt that way, I said finally. I thought it was Rose turning you against me, not me pushing you away. She never said anything bad about me in front of Aiden, a woman's voice said. We both turned around. Rose was standing at the foot of the porch. I hadn't heard her car pull up. She must have parked around the corner and walked over. She was wearing an elegant coat, her hair in a neat bun. Even in this situation, she looked impeccable. Rose? Aiden clearly hadn't expected her. I told you to wait in the car. I heard screaming, she said calmly. I thought I'd better join the conversation, since it was about me. She walked up the steps and stood beside Aiden, putting a hand on his shoulder in a gesture that was both supportive and possessive. I never said anything bad about Dad in front of you, she repeated, turning to Aiden but looking at me. There was no need. He was doing a fine job of pushing you away on his own. Don't lie, I said, looking her straight in the eye. From day one, you did everything you could to push me out of his life. I did everything so he could evolve, grow, become a better version of himself, she countered. Without the burden of the past, without outdated attitudes and limitations. If that required less contact with certain influences, then yes, I encouraged it. Enough, both of you, Aiden intervened. I'm not a thing you're dragging over. I'm a person who makes my own decisions. Of course, darling, Rose agreed softly, not taking her eyes off me. No one doubts that. I could read the challenge in her eyes, the certainty of victory. She knew Aiden was on her side, knew I'd lost this war long before it started. "What do you want, Rose?" I asked bluntly. "Why are you here?" "To set the record straight," she answered simply. "To say that your little revenge with the car didn't work. To make it clear Aiden and I are one and the same. And by attacking me, you're attacking him." "I didn't attack you," I objected. "I was responding to an insult." "An insult?" she interjected with feigned surprise. "You barged into our house uninvited, on a holiday when we had other plans. You violated our privacy, ignored our express wishes, and you call it an insult that I didn't let you ruin our evening." "I didn't barge in. I came to visit my son and grandson on a holiday," I said, feeling my anger boiling over again. "And you kicked me out the door like a beggar instead of at least calling Aiden." "I was protecting our home and our family," Rose cut me off. Which, by the way, Aiden should have done too, if he hadn't been so sentimental about his origins. She said the last words with such disdain that even Aiden flinched slightly. "Rose," he said quietly, "don't be like that." "Yes, darling, you do," she said, keeping her eyes on me. "It's time for honesty. Your father has been manipulating you for years, playing on guilt and family duty. He can't accept the fact that you've grown up, become successful, entered a circle he can only dream of. His antics last night were just another attempt at control, another way to remind himself, to cut into our lives." I stared at her, stunned by this outright hostility. She was no longer hiding behind a mask of politeness, no longer pretending. At last the truth came out. "You're wrong," I said quietly. "I just wanted to be a part of my son's life, to see my grandson grow up, to be a family despite our different views and interests." "Family?" Rose grinned. "After everything you'd done, after years of criticizing every choice we made, every decision we made, after yesterday, do you really think you can still be called a family?" I looked at Aiden, looking for support, looking for a little understanding, but his face remained closed, eyes averted. "Aiden," I called out, "is that what you think too? That I'm not family anymore?" He was silent for a few agonizingly long seconds. Then he looked up with pain in his eyes, but also determination. "After last night, yes," he said quietly but firmly. "You crossed the line, Dad. You deliberately wanted to hurt Rose, wanted to ruin our party. That's, that's not what family does." His words hit me like a physical blow. I felt something inside me finally break the last hope, the last connection. "I see," I said after a pause. "Then the decision has been made. We'd like you to leave us alone," Rose said, and there was no gloating in her voice, only cold certainty. "No phone calls, no surprise visits. If Aiden wants to contact you, he'll do it himself." I nodded, not trusting my voice, then turned to my son. "Is that what you want? For me to disappear from your life?" Aiden swallowed, clearly struggling with his emotions. "I don't know what I want right now, Dad. I need time to think things through, to process things. But right now, yeah, I think we should keep our distance." "And Hayden," I asked, feeling my voice shake, "should he forget his grandfather exists too?" "Don't bring the baby into this," Rose interjected. "Hayden will do just fine without," I said. "Rose," Aiden interrupted her. "I'll decide that." He turned to me. "Hayden's too young to understand all this. I don't want him caught between two fires. When he's older, we'll decide what to do. In the meantime, let's just keep things the way they are. As it is," meaning almost no contact, I thought. "Seeing each other once every 6 months under Rose's watchful eye, giving gifts that then disappear in an unknown direction, being a stranger to my own grandson." "I understand," I said, though I didn't really understand anything. I didn't understand how we'd gotten to this point, how everything had fallen apart, how I'd lost my son without even realizing it. "We should go," Rose said, tugging Aiden's sleeve lightly. "Hayden is home alone with the babysitter." Aiden nodded but didn't move, still looking at me. In his eyes, I could see a mixture of emotions. Anger, frustration, but also something else, something akin to regret. "Goodbye, Dad," he said finally. "Maybe someday." He didn't finish the sentence, but I didn't need him to. "Maybe someday we can start over. Or Maybe someday I'll realize you were right, or maybe someday I'll forgive you. All of these options hung in the air, unspoken but tangible. Goodbye, son, I said, feeling a lump rise to my throat. Take care of yourself. And Hayden. December was unusually cold for Dover. The snow had fallen early, blanketing the town in white before the middle of the month. I stared out the kitchen window at the snow-covered garden, slowly sipping my morning coffee. 3 weeks had passed since that conversation on the porch. 3 weeks of absolute silence. No calls, no texts, no visits. It was as if Aiden and his family had simply disappeared from my life, leaving behind only bitter residue and memories. Christmas was approaching. The town was festooned with garlands and wreaths, and holiday decorations were in store windows. Eleanor had always loved Christmas, turning our house into a winter fairy tale. We would decorate the tree as a family, cook a special dinner, and exchange gifts. In recent years after Eleanor's death, the holiday faded, but I still tried to keep at least some of the traditions alive. I bought a small Christmas tree, hung some old ornaments we'd collected over the years, cooked myself a holiday dinner, nothing fancy, but still not your average sandwich, and always bought gifts for Aiden and his family, even if I wasn't sure I'd see them on the holiday. This year I didn't bother doing anything. The boxes of ornaments remained in the closet. I didn't buy a Christmas tree. For the first time in years, I didn't care if Christmas came or not. The neighbors noticed the change. Harold invited me to chess several times, but I declined on various pretexts. Mrs. Finch, who lived 2 doors down, brought home-baked cookies and tried to find out what was wrong, but I just said something about being a little sick. In truth, I just didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to answer questions, to explain, to tell. What could I say? That my son had disowned me after a stupid revenge on his wife? That I was all alone because of my own stupidity and stubbornness? That my life was falling apart and I didn't know how to put it back together? Every day I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest, a feeling of emptiness that wouldn't go away no matter how many things I found to do. I tried to distract myself. I started tearing down the garage, going through old things, even taking on small repairs I'd been putting off for years. But my thoughts kept coming back to Aiden, to our last conversation, to his words, "You're out of line, Dad." Sometimes I caught myself reaching for the phone to call him, to apologize, to explain, to try to make things right. But I stopped myself every time. What could I say? I'm sorry I organized the towing of your wife's car. I'm sorry I spent years judging your life choices. I'm sorry for being such a stubborn and inflexible father. All of these apologies seemed empty, insincere. I wasn't sure I was truly sorry for my actions and thoughts. Yes, what I'd done on Thanksgiving had been petty and stupid. But didn't Rose deserve it after all the years of condescension, of neglect, of my son's gradual estrangement from me? And more importantly, was it too late? Was the breakup irreversible after all that had happened? On one such day, when the longing and loneliness seemed especially unbearable, I found a Christmas card in the mailbox. Not an electronic one, but a real paper one, stamped and postmarked. Hardly anyone sends those anymore. It was from Lydia, my younger sister. We hadn't spoken to each other in 5 years, since we'd had a big fight over our parents' inheritance. My father had left a small house in Vermont, and we couldn't agree on what to do with it. I offered to sell it and split the money. Lydia wanted to keep it as a family heirloom. We ended up saying a lot of nasty words to each other, and the connection ended. The card was simple, a winter landscape with a short inscription inside. Norbert, thinking of you this Christmas. I hope you are doing well. If you ever want to talk, my number hasn't changed. Lydia. I looked at those lines, written in familiar, neat handwriting, and something stirred inside. Pride, resentment, or maybe regret for lost time and missed opportunities. The postcard sat on the kitchen table for days. I passed by, noticed it out of the corner of my eye, but didn't dare call. Too much water had passed. Too many resentments had accumulated. And yet, that was my sister, the only person I had left. On the 5th day, waking up in the middle of the night from another nightmare. They'd been frequent lately. Aiden always left without looking back. I made up my mind. It was about 3 in the morning, but I knew Lydia had always been an owl. Even as a child, she'd stayed up late with a book. It was impossible to wake her up for school in the morning. I dialed her number, listening to the long beeps and preparing myself for the possibility that she wouldn't answer, or worse, would drop the call when she saw my name on the screen. Norbert? Her voice came through the phone, surprised but not cold. Did you get my card? I did, I answered, suddenly confused. I apologize for calling so late. I didn't think of the time. It's okay. I haven't gone to bed yet. I was watching an old movie on TV. How are you? A simple question, but it got me thinking. How am I? Lonely, lost, broken, angry. All of those words ran through my head, but none of them seemed to fit. I've been better, I finally said. How are you doing? Slowly. My knees hurt in the winter, but I can't complain. I work at the local library 3 days a week, have a cat. Life goes on. We didn't talk for a while. It was strange to hear her voice after so many years of silence, a voice that reminded me of my childhood, of my parents, of a time when the world seemed simpler and safer. Shorty, why did you send a postcard? I asked bluntly. After everything that had happened, she sighed. I don't know, Norb. Maybe I'm getting old, getting sentimental. Maybe I'm just tired of holding grudges. Life's too short, you know, especially at our age. I know, I agreed, thinking about Eleanor, about Aiden, about all the lost opportunities. More than that. Did something happen? She asked, catching the note in my voice. You seem different than usual. And suddenly I started talking. Everything about my relationship with Rose from the beginning, about Aiden's gradual estrangement, about my loneliness after Eleanor's death, about how it all came to a head on Thanksgiving. The words poured out like a dam had burst. I wasn't trying to whitewash myself or make Rose look like the ultimate villain. I was just telling it like it was, with all my mistakes, my misconceptions, my moments of weakness and anger. Lydia listened without interrupting. Only sometimes she asked clarifying questions or sighed quietly in particularly difficult places. When I finished talking about the last time I'd spoken to Aiden and Rose, there was silence. Gee, Lydia said finally, I didn't realize you were going through something like this. Yeah, I said shortly, suddenly feeling tired. It was about 4 in the morning, and it was still dark outside the window. This is what my life is like now. What are you going to do, I wondered. It was a question I had been asking myself every day for the past weeks. What's next? How to live with this emptiness, with this breakup? I don't know, I answered honestly. I try to just exist day to day. Have you thought about contacting Aiden, apologizing, explaining yourself? I have, but I'm not sure it would make a difference. And I'm not sure I really want to apologize. What I did was stupid, but, she deserved it, Lydia. After all these years, after everything she's done. Maybe so, she agreed abruptly. But this isn't about whether Rose deserved it or not. It's about you, how you feel right now. Did this revenge make you feel better? Did it make you feel better? I wondered. Did it? In the first few minutes, as I watched Rose's confused face as she discovered her car was missing, yes, there was a grim, vengeful satisfaction. But then, emptiness, the bitterness, the realization of the irrevocability of the rupture. No, I admit it. It didn't. Quite the opposite. That's what happens with revenge, Lydia said softly. It seems sweet in fantasy, but in reality it leaves only a bitter taste. You've become a philosopher in your old age. I grinned, but without malice. More like a bookworm. When you work in a library, you read all sorts of things. We were silent again, but now it was a comfortable silence, without tension or awkwardness. You know, Lydia said suddenly, I've been thinking, maybe you should come for Christmas, to my place in Rochester. You're sitting all alone in an empty house. I've got a fireplace, a cat, a rocking chair. It's just like a cozy old age novel. I didn't expect such an offer. After all these years of silence, after all the hurts and misunderstandings, just to come to the party, as if nothing had happened. I don't know, Lydia, I answered cautiously. It's unexpected. For me, too, she admitted with a slight chuckle. I hadn't planned to suggest it, but here, I did. Maybe it's a sign that it's time to let bygones be bygones. A clean slate. A clean slate. Those words echoed in me. Wasn't that what I wanted? A new chapter, without the pain and disappointment of the last few years? But was I ready? Could I forgive and forget old hurts? Think about it, Lydia said, not waiting for an answer. No pressure. If you decide to come, I'll be glad. If not, I'll understand too. We talked some more about her work at the library, about her new cat named Shakespeare, about the weather in Rochester, colder than Dover, but less snow. Then we said goodbye, promising to call each other in a couple days. After the conversation, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen, watched the sky slowly lighten outside the window, and thought about Lydia's proposal. To leave Dover for the holidays, leave a house full of memories and ghosts of the past, to spend Christmas with a sister he hadn't seen in years. The idea seemed both daunting and enticing at the same time. On the one hand, I was used to my solitude, my rituals, my home. On the other, the prospect of spending another Christmas in an empty house, thinking about Aiden and his family celebrating without me, was unbearable. By morning, I had made my decision. I opened my laptop, which I used mostly to pay bills and occasionally check the news, and started looking for plane tickets to Rochester. It would be cheaper but longer by train, and at my age, comfort was becoming more important than economy. I found a flight for December 23rd. Not cheap given the pre-holiday frenzy, but affordable. I've always been frugal with money, saving for a rainy day. It looks like that day has come. After issuing the ticket and receiving the confirmation email, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if making this decision had lifted some of the heaviness I'd been carrying around for the past few weeks. Not all of it, of course. The pain of breaking up with Aiden hadn't gone away, but at least it was something. I called Lydia and told her of my decision. She was excited, talking about what she was going to cook for the holiday, how she was going to decorate the house, where I was going to sleep. In her voice, I could hear sincere excitement, almost like when she was a child waiting for Santa Claus. After talking to her, I felt something akin to anticipation for the first time in a long time. Not joy, no. It was still a long way off. But at least it wasn't the total apathy I'd been in for the last few weeks. I spent the next few days preparing for the trip. I had to decide what to take with me, who to notify of my departure, how to prepare the house for my absence. Small, everyday tasks distracted me from my gloomy thoughts, filled the emptiness. I warned Harold to keep an eye on the house. I asked Mrs. Finch to pick up the mail. I checked all the faucets, unplugged unused appliances, closed the main water valve in case of severe frost. The night before I left, packing my suitcase, I found in the closet a box of gifts I'd bought for Aiden and his family before Thanksgiving. A sweater for my son, a silk scarf for Rose, a construction set for Hayden, all neatly wrapped with name cards attached. I stared at these gifts for a long time, not knowing what to do with them. Throw them away? Give them to someone? Leave them until better times, which may never come? In the end, I decided to take only a gift for Hayden, not to send to him. Rose would probably intercept the package and throw it away, but just to give to some kid in Rochester. Maybe Lydia knows a family that can't afford expensive Christmas presents. I put the presents for Aiden and Rose back in the closet. Let them lie there, Dusty, reminders of a rift that may never be healed. The evening before I left, I went through the house one last time, checking to make sure everything was ready. I lingered in the bedroom, looking at Eleanor's picture on the bedside table. She was smiling from it, bright, lively, happy. That's how I remembered her. That's how she stayed in my heart, despite all the storms she'd been through. "What would you say now, Ellie?" I asked aloud, though I usually avoided such sentimentality. "Would you approve of my trip? Would you advise me to call Aiden again, to try to make things right?" The picture was silent, but somehow I was sure Eleanor would approve of my decision. She was always in favor of reconciliation, of forgiveness, of new beginnings, and she loved Lydia, despite our differences. I was up early this morning, even though the flight wasn't until noon. Once again, I checked my documents, money, tickets. I had breakfast, washed the dishes, put away any food that might have spoiled during my absence. Just before I left, I looked at my cell phone. No missed calls, no messages from Aiden. I hadn't expected to see them, but I still felt a pang of disappointment. I hesitated and typed in a message. Going to my sister's house in Rochester for Christmas. The house will be empty until New Year's Eve. Wishing you a good holiday season. I sent it without waiting for a reply. The cab arrived exactly at the appointed time. I took one last look around the house, locked the door, and got into the car. The driver, a young guy with an earpiece in his ear, asked which terminal to take me to. I showed him my ticket printout. Rochester, he said, starting the engine. To your family for the holidays? Yes, I answered after a pause. My sister. Great. He nodded with professional goodwill. Family is important, especially at Christmas. I didn't argue. I just watched as my house, my neighborhood, my city slowly slipped behind me. Ahead was the airport, the plane, Rochester, meeting my sister after so many years apart. A new chapter, a new beginning. Not perfect, not cloudless, but at least not the emptiness and loneliness of the last few weeks. And Aiden, well, I wasn't going to forgive him. Not him, not even Rose. Too much humiliation, too much pain over the years, too much betrayal. Some wounds never heal, some bridges burn irrevocably. But I could move on. I could find new meaning, new connections, new purpose. I could stop defining myself through a relationship with my son that may have been doomed from the start. I could start over, at 67 with a clean slate. And as I looked out at the snow-covered fields outside the cab window, I felt that maybe that's what it took. Maybe sometimes you have to lose everything to gain something new. Maybe sometimes ruptures are necessary to heal old wounds and move on. Maybe that's what life is all about. Not clinging to the past, but daring to step into the unknown future, no matter how frightening it may seem.